Buenas tardes a todos. Estamos ya completando las pruebas de la sesión y entonces, bien, vamos a dar ya la abertura. Perdonad estos 5 minutos de retraso. Como sabéis, hoy es la primera de las 3 sesiones que vamos a hacer de un BIM Tour internacional, en el que habremos BIM desde Venezuela y BIM Tour desde España. Nos hemos unido para crear 3 grandes sesiones, 3 sesiones que van a ser, ahora sí, como tocar unos temas importantes para ambos países, tanto para Venezuela como para España. Y para ello también hemos invitado a ponentes de todo el mundo. Hoy va a ser una sesión en la cual ahora daré paso a Leonardo Mata, que es el CEO de DataLaing y con quien hemos establecido esta alineación de objetivos para intentar ayudar a ambos países a poder dar un push a BIM. Hoy contaremos con una primera intervención de 10 minutos de marcas. Después vamos a tener una sesión, ya 3 sesiones de 20 minutos, en la que tenemos a Jaime Astor de Banca y Finanzas, que como BIM Manager nos va a explicar su trabajo dentro de una marca. Vamos a tener también a Tony Rimela, que con una vastísima experiencia en Estados Unidos, donde hemos trabajado para la GSA, para distintos organismos e instituciones, pero también el hecho de haber participado en numerosos proyectos para el mundo de la inversión y para el mundo de la empresa. Y cerraremos la sesión con Isame Lapsi. Isame Lapsi desde ITGITS hará una conexión desde Chipre. Él está trabajando en los Emiratos Árabes y para todos los países árabes, en el caso de Asia, en la que también nos ayudará a entender de qué manera se gestiona un gran proyecto para un banco o para unos inversores. Por tanto, ya sin más dilación, Leonardo, te paso la palabra y adelante.
Buenas tardes desde Venezuela. Welcome to this international webinar from Spain, Venezuela, and the country that participate today. We send greeting to all. Venezuela, beautiful country and in difficult circumstances, but with hope and dream. Thank you for coming. Entonces, diciendo que el tema del COVID ha impactado fuertemente a nuestra realidad, el mente, los corazones, y nos va a obligar, pues, de una manera demoledora a cambiar, ¿no? En este sentido, la transformación digital es la integración de nuevas tecnologías en todas las áreas de una empresa para cambiar su forma de funcionar y procesos de gestión, lo cual el COVID ha acelerado esa transformación que van a ser tratada por los distinguidos expositores en las próximas presentaciones. El objetivo de esta transformación digital es optimizar los procesos, la competitividad y darle mayor valor agregado a los clientes. Evidentemente que la clave de esa transformación es abandonar la zona de confort, la mentalidad abierta a la renovación, fomentar las competencias digitales de tanto personal de la empresa y directivos, y definir una estrategia digital que involucre a toda la organización. En este sentido, de esta encuesta reciente de una importante encuestadora internacional, habla que el 67% de los directivos de los CEO de empresas van a adoptar, pues, un esquema de automatización en todos sus procesos. Eso es importante. Y aterrizamos en el tema de la transformación digital en la construcción, que implica el manejo de datos digitales, todo lo que es la recopilación por la vía, pues, digital, donde el BIM es un impulsor de esa transformación dentro del sector de la construcción, y las infraestructuras están diseñadas no solamente para su objetivo primario, sino para proporcionar nuevos servicios. La conectividad es allí donde vamos a tener un gran impacto. El valor de la información asociada a las infraestructuras podrá ser un valor mayor incluso al de la propia infraestructura construida. Y tenemos que hacer énfasis en la automatización y la integración del BIM con la industria y la parte de industrialización en proyectos tanto públicos como privados. En este sentido, la construcción, y por eso hicimos uno de los objetivos de estos webinars y los 3 webinars que hemos organizado conjuntamente con los amigos de España, lo distinguido, pues el arquitecto Ignacio Pérez Arnal, el BIM Academy y el BIM Tour y todo el grupo que maneja esta temática en España, que tienen unos eventos programados de alto nivel. Esto plantea una serie de desafíos que son financieros. Bueno, primero, que es el tema que nos trae hoy, la parte de soporte y justificar la inversión para todos las nuevas empresas, los profesionales. Implica un apoyo global, sobre todo para los países emergentes como Venezuela, para poder hacer esta adopción, y tecnológicos, porque implica también adoptar nuevos esquemas de trabajo, ¿no? Y ahí es donde surgen, y ya con esto termino brevemente para darle paso a los distinguidos expositores, tenemos que buscar planes de financiamiento donde, para implementar el BIM en los distintos países, no solamente en Venezuela, sino en Latinoamérica, donde podemos hablar de unas ideas que pueden ser en la parte de microcréditos para profesionales independientes en el área de BIM, para el tema de formación, hardware y software, financiamiento para entes promotores de BIM, para entes formadores de BIM, para pymes, financiamiento de proyectos donde se implementa la metodología BIM, la parte municipal, que es uno de los, lo que es la aplicación del BIM en los municipios, por donde empezó el tema, donde empezaría aquí por los requisitos BIM en nuestro país, ¿no? Y en cualquier país, en la parte de municipalidad, y por eso tenemos un webinar también organizado con los distinguidos amigos, pues, de BIM Academy y BIM Tour desde España. Entonces, bueno, con esto finalizo. Estas son las alternativas de financiamiento en obras públicas, y hay que activar en Venezuela y los países latinoamericanos el tema multilateral, que es importante el financiamiento multilateral, sobre todo las circunstancias que estamos viviendo en Venezuela, ¿no? Entonces, bueno, hay que ver el 2020 que terminó, nos dejó una herencia no muy satisfactoria, pero bueno, el 2021 también va en la misma onda. Tenemos que prepararnos para afrontar esta transformación digital que es necesaria, dadas las circunstancias que estamos viviendo en todo el mundo, ¿no? Tenemos entonces este evento organizado con el BIM Tour International, Banca y Finanzas, que es la que estamos tratando. Tenemos 3 extraordinarios expositores a nivel internacional, y a los cuales le damos la bienvenida y muchas gracias por haber aceptado esta invitación. La humanidad siempre ha estado sujeta a grandes amenazas a lo largo de la historia. Lo que vivimos ahora no es la primera ni será la última, tampoco ha sido la peor. De lo que sí estamos seguros es que con nuestra fe en Dios, inteligencia, siempre hemos sido capaces de superarla, y esta vez no será diferente. Es una cuestión de tiempo de superar esta crisis. Entonces, muchísimas gracias. En nombre de Venezuela, le damos la bienvenida. Agradecemos el apoyo de BIM Academy, del arquitecto Ignacio y de todo su equipo. Y aquí estamos, pues, en esta extraordinaria sesión, que ahora la dejo en manos de Ignacio para pasar a la primera presentación. Algunas de ellas serán en inglés. Luego habrá un comentario al final sobre, pues, más o menos los aspectos más importantes. No hay traducción simultánea contemplada. Hay las intervenciones en los idiomas correspondientes. Muchísimas gracias, Ignacio. Te cedo la palabra.
Gracias, Leonardo. Vamos a dar paso a Antonio Videla.
Okay. Well, Ignacio, shall I begin now? Yes. Or are you seeing the slide?
Yes, we do see it.
Okay, and
Tony, I do not know if you are listening to me. The problem is that Jaime Astor has lost his connection. So if you are able to make a short introduction about you and to begin your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Yes, we can begin now. So my name is Tony Rinella. I am with Strategic Building Innovation. We are located in the United States, in Hong Kong and in Singapore. We do strategic consulting for digitalization, including BIM, for owners around the world. We're going to share some experience that we have in that regard, and also some experience that we've had directly with banking facilities, including managing roughly 6 million square feet of space and more than 500 branch banks for a US-based financial institution. So what we'll talk about today are critical success factors when using BIM, and we'll go through several of those. The points being to understand the potential of BIM, to select how BIM will be used in order to further organizational goals, to develop the information requirements to support these functions, and to make a BIM adoption roadmap. Then we'll look at some specific uses that have to do with space inventory, occupancy management, rental chargebacks, and then just a final word on making sure that as you embark on this journey yourselves, you think about not only the long-term planning, but also the short-term gains so that you get some immediate satisfaction. So when considering BIM and the implementation of building information modeling, we have to think about these layers of accomplishment. First, what will we accomplish using BIM? How will this support our organizational goal and mission? What processes, what specific activities will be supported? What tools will be used? And what information will we need? We'll take a look at each of these points as we go through this presentation together. Most people already understand that building information models have a tremendous potential to bring together information that we know about all of our facilities anywhere in the world, and to be able to have all of this information in the same formats, in computable formats, so that our tools can quickly process, analyze, alert us to trends, warn us if there are difficulties coming up, and significantly reduce the time it takes to find information and manage our facilities. Some of the things that people immediately think of are, oh, I can put on 3D glasses and I can see a wonderful walkthrough of my facility. And this is very useful to educate staff, to inform decisions. It can help us introduce key features of a facility to the people who will dwell in it, and also for our leasing efforts. But there are other things we can do as well. Because the information is stored digitally and in a rational format, which is understandable by many systems, we can do all sorts of analysis to optimize the value we receive from these facilities. And those can be in terms of making sure that the facilities are comfortable, making sure that they're functional, making sure that we use the space well, and making sure that we support workers or residents who are inside the building. We can also use these tools to help us with preventative and predictive maintenance so that we can understand what tasks need to be done to keep all the systems in the facility functioning well. We can also use this to track our requests for service, our trouble tickets, so that we can see an overall view of what's happening with our facility at any moment, and organize many facilities so that we can better manage the labor force. We can also use it to help the people who are going to service the equipment, either for scheduled maintenance or to handle an emergency that arises, so that they can immediately, before they go into the situation, get a visualization of what the equipment looks like. They can see where it is in location to other portions of the building, and they can use their handheld tools or some other visualization to quickly get all the information they need about the piece of equipment to help them service it more quickly. It's also possible to do scenario planning and simulation. Scenarios can be as simple as, how do we show people how to exit a building in the case of an emergency? Or if we're doing renovations, how will we experience the building as the renovations take place and certain portions of the building are under construction. We can also use these tools, the BIM tools connected with Internet of Things for our systems and services, to begin to understand how we're using energy, water, other resources, and not only see what we're doing in this moment, but based on analysis of the patterns of use, to be able to predict what we will need in the future. This can be extremely useful, for example, if there are seasons of the year or parts of the day when we have a high cooling need, and we can understand how to purchase our energy or perhaps buffer and store our energy so that we can accommodate these spikes in need without having to go to more expensive resources. Also very useful for those who are concerned with green energy so that they can assure themselves that their storage capacity will meet their peak need. Perhaps most importantly, these digital systems give us the ability to integrate reporting from all these various aspects so that at an executive level, we can get a very quick dashboard view and a look to see, is this building functioning the way we anticipated, the way we planned, the way we budgeted, or is something going better than expected or worse than expected, in which case we can take intervention. So once we know all of these things, we can then begin to understand what our use cases will be. That is how we will use BIM. We can understand what information we will need to support these uses, and therefore what information needs to be in the asset information model, the BIM, and we can then inform the creation of that asset information model, the BIM. This model can have many different kinds of information. It can have the geometry, so we know what things look like. It can have the data, so we know what things are. And it can have other related documents, for example, warranty information or maintenance information, so that we understand how to care for the systems in our building. And then anyone can get a quick report to get the highlights of this information, or they can look at more detailed documentation. So when we think of an information model, a building information model or an asset information model, we're really talking about a collection of many different kinds of information, some of it in database, some of it in file formats, and some of it organized with a unique indicator that will help us access online information. What we need to think about is what we're going to do, what processes we're going to support, the tools that we're going to use, and the data that we need. We said that at the very beginning of this exploration. This is taking those statements and putting them in much, much more detail. And we're going to follow one example to see how what the organization wants to do influences what they need to see in their information model. In this case, we're taking one of the prospects for this organization, operational excellence. They want to get the most out of their facilities. In order to do this, they're going to have many different uses for the modeling technology. They're going to want to do scanning, photometric scanning for existing conditions so they can know what they have. They know that they're going to want to do asset management. They're going to want to understand what is in their buildings, how to evaluate it, and how to maintain it. They also want to know about how the buildings are being used, how they're occupying the building, what departments are where, what spaces are being used, what spaces are available. And they're also going to want to do rental allocation so that whoever is in the facility will be paying their rent, right? In order to do this, they're going to need a couple of tools. They're going to need building information modeling tools specifically designed for facility management. They're going to need other facility maintenance tools, which will help them manage the servicing of all the equipment. And they're going to have some access to their general ledger so that their internal groups who are occupying space can get a rental allocation chargeback that hits their GL. And for all these, they're going to need some data. They're going to need building information models and probably some drawings as well. They're going to need facility data, including who is occupying what space, and they're going to need some other data like current rental rates for their facilities. This seems very complex, and yet it really comes down to a simple statement of what information will be needed. Let's look at how those statements go together. The first thing we'd like to talk about is the difference between proprietary standards, meaning one brand, one vendor, the information produced can only function in that environment, versus open standards, which is a standard adopted by anyone who chooses to adopt it anywhere in the world. What we find with the closed, proprietary, software-focused standards is that if we have different disciplines, such as architecture to do design, fabrication to make the systems, energy to do analysis and supply of utilities, if they're using different software which do not speak to each other, then there's no possibility to optimize and analyze a collection of information. Whereas if we use an open standard, such as Open Bim, which you can find at Building Smart International, then all of these different functions can speak the same language. Those of you who may be struggling with my English right now will have sympathy for how important it is to have all of our systems speak a common language. Then we have to develop a plan to collect the data for the facility. It is very unlikely, especially for a large facility owner or an owner of many facilities, that they can, in one moment, gather all the information they need. It's important to do planning and follow that with implementation. The planning will look at the business requirements, such as those we've just spoken of. They'll want to develop a vision with objectives, that is, what will they accomplish, and targeting, which is what is the measure of success. If, for example, we say that we want to occupy our buildings, that's a good objective, but we need to measure what success in that category means. Are we looking for 100% occupancy, 98% occupancy, 80% occupancy? What is necessary in order to achieve our financial goals? And then a strategic roadmap to accomplish these things. In terms of the implementation and adopting BIM, it's wise to begin with a small project to prove the concept, make sure all the systems are working, make sure the staff are trained up and comfortable. And then to do a series of pilots. This is an example from one pharmaceutical company who decided the order in which they would do these pilots. The important thing is at each step, they gain more and more information. We mentioned that we'll talk about occupancy management and rental chargeback. Once we have the model in place and a data overlay system that allows us to give attributes to the spaces in the facility, we can ask quick questions. For example, is this space 1004 occupied or not? In this case, we see, oh, it's occupied. The system shows us this. That means I'm on my way to achieving my goal of occupancy for the facility. For rental chargeback, it's important to know for each of these rooms who's actually occupying the room. And in this case, we can see different departments of our organization are occupying different spaces. Commercial banking, for example, is occupying these three portions of this particular floor. Granted, this is a tiny toy example. The real examples from large facilities are too difficult to read. It gets all too small. With this, because we know the spaces they're occupying, the building information model can quickly calculate the area. It can understand the common areas, such as the lobby. It can understand areas which are typically allocated in a different way, such as the stairway. It can automatically compute the space that they're using in the facility and be able to apply the rental rate and give them the charge back. We can also look at other kinds of utilization. For example, the density. This particular organization has standards that they would like to follow of between 6 and 10 square meters per person for average staff, and a little bit more space for executives and people who require private offices. Because the building information model knows the occupancy and can very quickly calculate the area of these spaces, it can give a visual report to say, oh, this room 1001 is not being used effectively. There are more than 18 square meters per person in this space. So that helps us to understand how the space is being used. In this case, the occupancy information, which comes from tables that are arrived at either by survey or by having elements of the organization, departments in the organization, claim space or request space so that we know where they are, and the asset information model, the BIM, which knows the physicality of the space, together can go into a system that understands what's being occupied by whom and can calculate the rent, and then through a piece of middleware can actually impact the general ledger. That's a system we set up for one of our clients. In order for these systems to work, they need to be absolutely up to date and reliable. And because of this, the owner, after having established the requirements, needs to give those to the supply chain. In the case of building a building or doing renovations, those will be builders and design consultants. In the case of doing facility inventory, they may be consultants who are specifically in the business of looking at an existing facility and creating a model. In this case, when the information comes back and the owner receives the data, they need to verify that it's correct. Model checking software is a good way to do that as a double check. Anything that's wrong, they can send back into the supply chain to have it corrected. And then once it's approved, they can update their own internal databases so that they have reliable information. During operations, they may update these data to say equipment has been changed out, to update the occupancy map for who's occupying which spaces. This all happens with normal facility management. And in this case, the adopter of BIM will want to make sure that these systems are linked to their BIM system in some way. And then if it should come time to do a new project, a renovation, it's possible to compile a very accurate view of the facility, saving lots of time to go walk the facility and get new information, and then to be able to publish these existing conditions back into the supply chain. So in summary, it's important to understand your business objectives and your operational efficiency objectives, and then to think about BIM, both in terms of long-term planning, how we can do things like scenario management and understand facility use, and in terms of immediate action, such as finding we have a problem and being able to inform the people who will solve that problem to very quickly have the information they need and resolve the problem. You've seen a number of images in this presentation and some case study examples. We've provided this information about the sources for those, so you can check back. This is not to endorse any specific company or product or tool, but rather just to let you know where we found the information that we've shared today. So thank you very much.
I get to thank you for the introduction, and let me the video and explain who are you. In fact, now about a question here. In fact, Tony is the Senior Director and Strategic Innovation from Plan.com. Paso al castellano también. Tony tiene más de 40 años de experiencia profesional y que incluye toda una parte tanto del diseño arquitectónico dentro del mundo hospitalario, comercial y de lo que se llama como mixed use. Y además también en la forma integrada de trabajar entre público y privado, que se llama normalmente como PPPs, proyectos públicos y privados. Y hay una lista ingente de proyectos en el que él ha participado. Él también ha sido CEO de un estudio de arquitectura a nivel internacional durante más de 20 años y ha sido fundador y cofundador de distintas empresas, tanto educativas como tecnológicas. Él ahora, en estos momentos, está siendo uno de los puntos fundamentales de un grupo que se llama Bim Supporters, que también contabilidad, y una serie de referentes a nivel internacional ha puesto en marcha toda una serie de experiencias y de intercambio para intentar llevar el BIM a una parte mucho más compleja, una parte, tal como nos hizo, una parte mucho más posible. Bien, so thank you very much, Tony. I was making a little resume and a little video in Spanish. Y ahora vamos a dar paso a Isam Elapsi. Isam Elapsi es el CEO de iDigits. Hasta ahora había estado trabajando en grandes proyectos. De los últimos que recuerdo, hace 5 años, él dirigía todo el proyecto BIM del aeropuerto de Abu Dhabi, la nacional aérea de Abu Dhabi, que durante muchos años fue uno de los proyectos en BIM más grandes del mundo. Eran 700.000 metros cuadrados de edificación que él tenía de alguna manera que manejar y gestionar a través de BIM. Con él aprendimos que era la BIM Room y de qué manera se tenía que formar a todo el equipo cuando se tenía que acometer un gran proyecto. Por lo tanto, ahora vamos a dar paso a Isam. Sí. Isam, is your turn. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much, Ignacy, for the introduction. And also I would like to thank my colleagues who gave the presentations before. And I would like to give a warm welcome to the audience. And thank you so much for joining us in today's presentation. I hope that you will find my lecture as exciting and interesting as you are looking for. I will share my screen. I hope that you can see my screen clearly and you can hear my voice clear as well. Just want to give you a flavor about how can BIM and the construction business leverage banking business as well. As you know, BIM is very fruitful technology and proven to be very efficient for the construction business. We have been working to give you a small introduction about iDigits and my team. We started the business of BIM since more than 23 years. We started in 1997. We emerged in the heart of a mega contractor, and we started and we leveraged BIM since that time for the construction of many projects worldwide. So we have more than 23 years of hands-on quality work, more than 200 projects in diversified fields, in the civil works, oil and gas, hospitals, infrastructure works, more than 20 million meters square of building space and infrastructure layouts, more than 45 billion of US dollar value of works. Our team consists of more than 200 talented BIM engineers and a group of about 50 ICT and automation experts. Just in the beginning, I would like to tell you some basics about the way we work. Our definition for information management, or BIM, is simply or challengingly, it is expressed in this diagram. So BIM is the central information data repository where all the functions of a project or a client, or the systems, commercial applications, time management, material management, construction, document management, all of them are integrated in what we call it a central data repository, where the project or the facility can be maintained, can be run, can be constructed. So if you want to do really an effective utilization of this technology, you need to look seriously in integration between the different applications and the different functions, the different systems and the different people in an organization or in a project. And this is the philosophy and the heart of our operation. And as you know, interoperability and data exchange between clients, between stakeholders, between the different stakeholders or the different partners in any system or in any project require a serious look towards interoperability and data exchange. That's why we give this topic a serious look, and we have developed what we call it electronic data interface. And this electronic data interface is the start of any relation between us and others, or between any partners working in this technology or around information exchange and information management. The third fundamental for our operation is scope management. If you want to do anything properly, you need to understand how to quantify it, how to measure it, whether it's a space, an area, whether it is material to be bought, whether it is equipment to be utilized, resources to be deployed. So you need to understand very well the scope of what you want to build, what you want to manage. And once you know it well, you can plan it well, and definitely you can a lot of things to control the operation of that facility or that asset. The fourth basic fundamental for our operation is how to name assets. To work with objects, these objects must have a unique identifier, what we call it an asset tag. And this asset tag needs to be maintained through any phase: design, construction, post-construction, handing over, facility management, operation and maintenance, even integrating with GIS, integrating with IoT. So we need to have an asset, and this asset needs to be tagged, need to be captured. All the information for that asset need to be hosted in a central data integrated repository with all the information about this object specifically, which means the whole facility is in one central data repository, carrying the shape, the functional characteristics, the physical characteristics, the documents, all the information relevant for that asset in one system. And this is one of the basic fundamental ways we work and operate in the BIM field. Last but not least, it's very important to capture information. You need to structure it, save it, and then disseminate the information, share it with other stakeholders, suppliers, partners. And so collaboration and data sharing is a fundamental in our work. and of course, collaboration, workflows, and workflow management is also important to our business. Now let's talk about the relation between banking sector and the construction business. It is obvious that there is so much dependence of the construction sector on the banking business, and actually all the supply chain of projects on the construction field takes facilities from banks, whether a main contractor, supplier, subcontractor, logistics. All of the construction process do take facilities and utilize bank facilities in their operation. So there is huge dependence of the construction industry on the banking sector and the other way around. This is one important synergy or place where banking system and the construction system and the construction sector is overlapping. The second one is a lot of banks and investors go in partnership with public partnership, private partnerships to create projects, to create assets. And this requires the collaboration between the owner, and this time the owner is the banking system and the contractor. So it's not only financing, it's also owner. So the bank is acting like either a full owner or a partial owner. The third way of cooperation between the banking system and the construction sector is the fact that the banks are hosted in buildings or facilities, and these facilities are constructed by contractors. So there's a direct relation between banks and the assets they are hosted in, and of course the construction companies who have built these assets. And last but not least, there is a significant contribution for the banking system in innovation and sustainability, green buildings, and circular economy. And of course, this is a field where BIM has proven very successful in giving solid information to all these technologies that we will see some examples in a while. Now we'll take it one by one and discuss some of the aspects, and then show you a couple of use cases from our experience in our relation with the banking sector. So when it comes to a bank financing the construction supply chain, then the banks really need to understand if those who are taking loans from the bank, if they are performing properly or not. And as all of us know, BIM gives great platform for transparent information reporting, for capturing progress and healthy stand of participants or suppliers of a project. And as such, the banks will feel more confident about the performance of those who are giving them loans, or those who are taking loans from the banks. So the bank needs a transparent way to understand if those suppliers or those who are taking loans are performing properly or not. And in general, the bank is interested to know if the project is performing properly or not. Another way is, or another point where the bank needs to utilize this technology very well, is to verify the scope or an accurate assessment of the scope of work. And this, as all of us know, BIM is well positioned in providing scope to the supply chain, including the banking, who are providing the financial background for project execution. Of course, as we said, banks need to understand if projects are performing properly or not. They need to check the performance of the main contractor, the supplier, the subcontractor, the manufacturer, because they are utilizing the money of the banks for running their business. And at a certain point, they need to return the money. And this relation is dependent on the performance on the project. As you know, a lot of facilities are given to the participants in a project based on their invoices. So somebody needs to check and verify that the invoices are credible and the performance of that supplier is credible. And as we know, variation orders, change management affects the relation between the construction sector and banks. And definitely, from our experience, BIM has been well established in verifying variations and checking the assessment of change orders. And as such, in this place, banks can use and utilize this technology to understand the value of variation and then give financing based on the value of the change order. Those are some fields where banks can cooperate and utilize BIM during the construction process for those who are building the facility. And what you see in front of you is an example of how BIM can give a very good stand of the position of the construction process, and how the different interfaces between the different participants in a project can be captured in a BIM model. And also the relation between the financing sector and the banks can also be depicted in virtually, and in a BIM system can check the payment certificate, can check the progress of a project, and as such, the bank can also have a look on the performance of the project. Now, when we talk about banks being owners for projects, in this case, now the bank is not looking only in the performance of the project only. It is looking in ensuring that his facility is going to be delivered in time, in the correct quality, with the proper quality, according to the specifications. And also he needs to control the cost and the budget. He needs to make sure that his budget is maintained, and as much as possible, he can make less expenditure for that facility. And in the construction business, BIM has proven very effective as a project management tool. So there is a lot of the functions of project management, including planning, time management, progress monitoring, quality control, cost management, payment certificates, creating a dashboard where the bank can refer to and check the performance of his facility. If the designer has finished his work or not. Does the contractor has finished his work properly or not? Is the payment due? Is credible or not? All this can be extracted for the bank as an owner for a project that he is owning or that he is executing to achieve a certain target. And as you can see from our experience, we have realized important benefits for the construction industry if BIM is well positioned and executed through all the supply chain of the construction process. And you can see there is great saving that can be depicted, and the owner of the facility can get huge amount of return if he invests early enough in having a complete and comprehensive platform that drives the construction process digitally, creating a digital transformation platform where he can execute, see, and follow the construction operations from A to Z. This is an example for in one of our projects where one of the banks has two huge projects, and you can see a map of the locations of the projects, and also a map of the location of his branches. So we'll talk about the branches later, but now we are focusing about project dashboard. This is a dashboard. So the bank can check the status of permits, the status of documentation, the design, the percentage progress of the procurement through the dashboard for each and every project. And also he can witness visually each and every project, what is the progress in a BIM environment in a colored way. So he knows, for example, green is executed, gray is under construction, for example, or blue is 25% progress. And the third, collaboration between banking sector and construction business, and how BIM is leveraged in this cooperation. When banks, they have a lot of assets, buildings, facilities. Inside each and every building or facility, there are tremendous amount of assets, chairs, furniture, equipment, mechanical assets, electrical assets. And it is very important for the bank to be able to witness and see all these assets in a huge data base connected to many analysis and big data platform, where he can make good projection of the performance of his total portfolio of assets, how much he is spending for maintenance, how much he is spending for operations, how much he is spending for preventive maintenance, how much he is spending on repairs. So he is going to have a holistic view about the performance of his assets, and in a certain branch or in all the branches. He can also get deeper and using this technology by integrating the assets with IoT sensors, so he can have an as-built digital twin of the asset, and also a dynamic view of the performance of each and every asset through the sensors that are connected to that asset. So he gets an as-built condition and the performance dynamic database, so he can check the performance of the assets of his of a certain branch or of the whole portfolio of assets he has. And definitely during the operation and maintenance phase, he can achieve through that integration tremendous amount of return and benefits. And I would like just to take you to a couple of dashboards that we have developed for banks, where they can witness the performance of certain assets. For example, they can go to the dashboard, select a certain branch, and then go specifically to that branch and check the price of that asset, the performance of that asset, when it was last maintained, what was the cost of maintenance, when is the next schedule to be maintained, and then they can do a comprehensive cost or maintenance cost for the whole branch, or maybe at the end of the year for all the branches together. As you can see, you can do a lot of filtering and manipulation of data. Those are all live data. And this is really, this is an example from an existing use case for one of the banks in Africa. And as I said, you can integrate this with IoT system, and for one of our clients, we have integrated 26 different IoT systems with our dashboard, with our central BIM data repository. So you can see a 3D model for each and every asset. You can check the temperature, the performance, the quality of air in that room, the presence of persons in that room, and you can have an integrated view for all the branches at the hands of the top management or executives, where they can make good decisions about the performance of the building or the performance of the whole assets or portfolio of assets of the bank. Last but not least, I would like to talk about banks and their support for innovation, sustainability, green buildings, and circular economy. And as you know, BIM is a huge asset in that, because it captures all the functional characteristics of a facility with all the components of that facility. So a tremendous amount of studies can be done. Designs can be enhanced to make the building performance more green friendly, more environment friendly, reduce the carbon footprint, and enhance the performance of buildings in general. And I believe all these technologies the banks are interested to invest in, whether it is for their own facilities or for the facilities they are financing. And this is an example of very unique, innovative ideas where you can integrate BIM with manufacturing and creating a very robust and effective way for making the manufacturing process very smart and more cost effective. And this is some areas where banks would like to invest with manufacturers and factories. So where the bank will invest in innovation and manufacturers will receive the value as well as the banks. It's just an example for demonstration. And of course, we have utilized BIM very well for sustainability studies in many projects. And that's why I'm emphasizing on the importance of banks investing in sustainability initiatives for integrating BIM with sustainability. And this can be very fruitful for the supply chain of the construction industry and also for the banking sector. This is the end of my presentation. Just at the last slide, I'm emphasizing here on the importance and value of education, educating the supply chain from contractors, suppliers who are receiving this education and knowledge, and then executing that on site properly. This is a huge investment that need to be looked at, because the return of investment for having such educated resources is tremendous for the construction sector, for the banking sector, and for the whole society. And this is felt in all the projects that we worked with all our clients. And I believe it is a very good investment for banks to look in educating the supply chain on digital transformation and building information modeling. Thank you so much for listening. I hope the presentation was fruitful for all of you. And this is the end of my presentation.
It has been very, very interesting. And also because you are opening a lot of new questions for the sector. Let me make a short introduction of what you have shown us in Spanish. Bien, Isam lo que nos ha presentado es la importancia, por ejemplo, de la set tagging, la importancia de tener clasificados, equipados cada uno de los elementos con los que vamos a trabajar en un proyecto. Ha hablado de la importancia de la colaboración de todos los agentes que participan en un proyecto que normalmente también es un proyecto bancario. Muy pocos proyectos en general en la construcción se hacen con dinero de nuestro bolsillo solo. Ha hablado sobre la transparencia y ha hablado también sobre el accurate assessment, o sea, la importancia de tener una certificación muy precisa. Tenemos que pensar que somos un banco y de que cualquier variación y modificación nos puede suponer un problema. Después también ha hablado de hacer un project management efectivo. Y por último, nos ha gustado muchísimo este link que ha realizado con el tema de la sostenibilidad. Ahora vamos a pasar a una mesa redonda con Tony Rinella y con Isabel Apsi. Si tenéis alguno de vosotros alguna pregunta, podéis utilizar el chat tanto de YouTube Live como de Zoom. Sí que pediría a Leonardo de que me asistieras para poder, si aparece alguna pregunta, poderla trasladar. Y si os parece, vamos a trasladar la primera pregunta tanto a Tony como a Sam sobre un tema de seguridad y salud que me interesa mucho. Tony and Sam, I would like to ask you that Isam has talked about health and safety and environment. And how do you think, because it's something that we are studying quite hard because on the 28th April, it will be the International Day of Health and Safety. And we are thinking in doing a specific journey, a specific webinar of 1 day about how BIM can help us to have better numbers in health and safety. We discovered that only in Spain, we have around 334 accidents per day and have 1 death every 2 days. And this is something that talking with insurance companies that normally are really connected with bank companies are very worried about, and they want to help us to try to make lower, to make down this curve with these horrible data. What is your feeling, Tony and Isam, about health and safety and the direct connection with bank, the economic ecosystem, and the insurance firms?
Tony, please go first if you would like.
Okay, fine. For most of what you've said, I think Assam will have a great deal of information and lots of practical advice. I can say a few things that we're looking at. One of them is in terms of health and safety, to be able to use the building information model to understand the basic health and safety criteria for the building once it's accomplished. Are we able to have evacuation routes? Are we able to have good air quality? In fact, there is something called the well building movement that looks specifically at well-being, health, and safety in facilities and provides checklists and scorecards that people can use to understand the value of the built asset. In terms of construction, it is incredibly useful to use 4D, which is 3D models to show sequencing over time. And this can help us understand very basic problems like 2 cranes are going to swing into each other and cause harm, or there is a traffic pattern for material across a pathway that lots of trucks use, for example. Also, in terms of during the construction, we can use the model to first prevent hazardous conditions by using a model checking system, for example, to notice if there is a sharp fall off, a couple of meters without some kind of protective barrier. And then once we have mitigated all of those risks, to be able to use the model for training so that before people go to the site, if there are some hazardous places to be, if there are hazardous conditions, restricted access, that kind of thing, they can be made aware in advance so that they're not discovering these things on site for the very first time, but instead they're going to the site forewarned. However, I think Sam will have much more to say about this in terms of the design and construction.
Tony, thank you so much for those excellent examples. If I can add just a couple of, if I have time, Ignacio, I can add.
Yes, sure.
Yeah. I believe if you go to the real construction problems, it is very dynamic. So we need to capture this dynamic nature of construction. I mean, we have a lot of technologies, but all of them are as built, so as they are after the fact. If we are, what we are trying to do, or what we have managed to a certain extent, is to have an imagery system. Now photogrammetry is playing an excellent role in translating images into 3D. Now, and it's very cheap. So you can have continuous imaging and processing and site. So you are capturing really dynamically all the site activities and all the people running on site. You can have this with the laser scanning, mobile laser scanning, or even you can have it with the imaging. So what you are capturing the hazards as you go. You are not waiting, and you are capturing the movement of the people by two things: either from their mobile devices, from their the signs of or the signals from their mobiles, or you can introduce in their helmets a kind of an ID, an RFID. So with these two technologies, you can think there are tremendous ways of preventing accidents, and this are happening on the spot. So you will have a server that's processing all the time the geometry of the site, seeing the hazards, and like you are doing continuous clash detection, the safety officer will be monitoring all the areas where there is a risk on the spot. We are not, so it will, and then he will be able either to call or send like a vibration to the guy who is close to a risk point, either due to a crane above him or due to a deep point or due to a sharp edge. And the aim is to have a dynamic, natural system. This is what I think is a great way of solving these accidents that you are talking about in Spain, and we have a great experience on that.
This is very, very good. And now, let me make a short resume in Spanish. Los que vais siguiendo, si no podéis seguir la sesión en inglés, pero la intervención de Tony ha sido sobre la importancia de la utilización de la cuarta dimensión del BIM para realmente poder hacer un buen chequeo del modelo para incluso formar a todos los equipos que han de participar. Yo he preguntado sobre el Health and Safety, sobre la seguridad y salud. Es un problema que últimamente me preocupa mucho. Y Sam, el APSI, él ha comentado de la posibilidad de utilizar un servidor dinámico para poder adelantarse a los peligros que aparecen en una obra, ¿no? Sí que existen ya una especie de GPS que se colocan en los cascos de obra y, por lo tanto, cuando se detecta alguna situación anómala, ya puede generar una vibración, igual que lo hace un teléfono móvil. Esto es más interesante. Okay, so let's go to the next question. It's about the real value that BIM can offer to banking system and financing system. I think that there is a different issues if the bank or the financing office or investment office, if they are developers, as you have explained also, Ethan, if they are owners or if they are the ones that are giving the loans and the credits. But in order to see which is the real value, do you think that we can arrive right now to a situation where the payment can be done in an automatic way after one certification, and all of this system with an automatic certification, no? So with photogrammetry or with laser scan every week, every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, every month, and then with something like a blockchain system, all of this operation could be done. Because then, well, something that I suppose that is the thing that is more worrying to the banks is the payments, the delays, the modifications, these collisions that we can see, but at the end, we are worried because one collision or one clash, because it will affect the budget and the time planning. What do you think, Tony?
Isam, would you like to begin with this one since you
Sam.
Okay, thank you so much, Tony, for offering that. And very nice question, Ignacio. And I believe, yes, it is very possible that we create a payment certificate out of an integration between BIM and somehow the payment system of a project. And with the for example, let me give you a real example. Assume that we have a subcontractor who have finished his work in concrete. And in our system, this is what we do. We know that this subcontractor has finished, and because each element, each asset, each tagged object has its QA/QC sheet. So it is an approved construction. It's not only finished. It is approved by the quality control department, which means it is eligible for payment. So if we make a collection, which from the system, for all the objects that he finished and certified, it means we can create a payment certificate for that contractor. It will go to, let's say, the contract administrator. And with a triple, if it is very confidential and there is it requires to be very safe and secured operation, the contract manager can have a 3 ways authentication for a process. We don't need to go to blockchain. We don't need to wait to blockchain. But if this contract administrator or contract manager has 3 ways of authentication, so we know that he is the one certifying the payment for sure, agrees on the payment, then we can create a workflow between him, the contract department, maybe another signature, and then it goes direct to the bank for processing. We are not far away from doing that. In all our projects, we are creating payment certificates from a BIM model. There is no manual entry in the payment certificate. So progress is being collected from site using digital bin or using tablets, and you get payment certificate and the QC sheets together. It goes to the contract administrator. The payment is created. Now, what is missing is the part that has to do with the banking system. And I think if you can create the workflow and a secured system, I think it is doable. And I like the idea so much that you have just presented.
Yes.
Nancy, we have a question. We have a question for her. Possible. It's possible.
Yes, please.
Ya, en español, pregunta que tenemos por acá a los expositores en general, si en sus países al principio de BIM fue necesario el financiamiento bancario para que los profesionales y empresas adoptaran el BIM, ¿no? Como profesionales, es decir, y cómo diseñar un plan que sea atractivo. In your country, at the beginning of the BIM, was national and international bank financing necessary for professional and consulting companies to adopt BIM? Is possible, and how to design plans that are attractive to the return investment to the banks? That's the question. I don't know if you understand. I say that in English and Spanish.
Tony and Sam, the question is another side of the bank system, because also in Venezuela and Spain, it's different from other countries. In your countries, there has exist some bank financing product to integrate and to implant in big firms or little companies?
The question is in the beginning, before the Adopt Bim, a long years ago in many countries, that it was necessary to the bank assist to the professional and the company to adopt Bim. That is the question.
If I understood the question properly, Tony, did you would like to take it, or shall I answer?
Maybe we'll take it in turns. Why don't you start, and I have some thoughts to add at the end. But why don't you start with your practical experience?
Okay, thank you so much. You know, from our perspective, we believe that if banks will not invest in something unless they receive a value out of it. Correct. And so it's a business case. And we believe that we can, there's a lot of space for creating a business case to attract banks to finance BIM. And what the fields that I have just explained in the presentation are real practical fields where BIM can benefit the banking system. And actually, if you make the supply chain of the construction industry specifically more digital oriented and more more transformed into technology, definitely there will be more trust in their capabilities to be transparent, first of all, because transparency is an issue in the construction sector, and you know this very well. And second, you can report on the performance of each and every supplier, each and every participant. And as such, banks will feel more confident that they are investing their money in the correct place. And actually, they can monitor the performance of everybody. If we integrate the banking system with the dashboards of the building performance or of the project performance, they will see and realize if their money is being invested and used properly, and they expect to receive also the cash flow. Because actually what happens? We take loans from the banks, we put our invoices to the bank, and the bank gets part of it as a reimbursement for the loan. So we can...
The question is, I think it was more directed about when you are beginning with BIM in your country, do you get some kind of financing from banks?
No.
Banks are helping you or have some specific products in order to make the digital transition in companies?
No, we don't take financing from the banks directly. It comes from the government, actually.
Yeah.
It doesn't come from, unfortunately, it doesn't come from the banks. And I think there is a lot of room for convincing banks to invest really in this technology.
Well, they would have better data and better information about what they are investing in. And Tony, in the States, do you have some kind of help from the government or banks if you want to make your own digital transition, being an architect or being an engineering firm or a builder?
Right. Interestingly, we are not aware of any provisions made by the banking industry to invest specifically in BIM technologies for their clients or to reduce loan rates in recognition of the fact that BIM-informed projects frequently have a much lower risk. In the US, frequently these risks are borne by the owner and to some extent the project delivery chain. So less incentive maybe for the banking institutions themselves. One thing that I wanted to pick up on was you, from the previous question, you mentioned blockchain. And although that has not been widely implemented, there are some very interesting studies going on right now, which we've seen at the Center for Integrated Facility Engineering at Stanford University, specifically looking at the way blockchain and the transparency that brings can assist both banking financial institutions and owners understand the actual cash flow. We do understand that there is some reluctance to have all of the payment sequencing be 100% automated. Somebody would like to be able to, approve that visually. But so that all of the transactions and perhaps more importantly, all of the reporting of percent complete and work done and work approved will be part of a generally accessible record.
Very good. So, well, we have the last minutes of this really interesting roundtable that took last hours. Antes de todo, Leonardo, ¿ha habido alguna cuestión que quisiera remarcar
No, bien, bien. Por aquí tenemos alguna pregunta que hablan del mercado latinoamericano que es atípico, ¿no? Y el tema está en diseñar para la banca en Venezuela y en algunos países productos que le sean rentables a la banca para implementar el BIM en Venezuela. Por aquí, Francisco desde Maracaibo hace unas observaciones que los bancos, claro, la situación que tienen acá en Venezuela es compleja, ¿no? Los bancos invierten poco, comentamos por aquí que son fondos de inversión, venture capital, que son inversiones en riesgo. En algunos países latinoamericanos, puede decir que tienen alguna inversión, pero en el tema de riesgo, porque tienen que tomar algún riesgo para poder hacer factible la implementación de BIM en estos países que no ha sido, sobre todo, mostrarle las ventajas futuras que tendrá por lo menos la banca al pedir esos proyectos con metodología BIM, ¿no? Entonces, es romper el cerco de inversión para poder hacer factible toda la metodología.
Pues si os parece, vamos cerrando con la última pregunta y antes del cierre final. Tony and Nissan, this is the last question. The question would be how to get there. No? So how do you think, which would be your recommendations in order that the bank ecosystem of any country would be aware of these technologies and to try to improve the way of financing big projects and projects? What do you think? Which would be your approach for that?
Well, maybe I'll start with this one and let Isam make it more real, because this is a conceptual idea. The very first thing is probably to understand what are the greatest risks in the project today. Where do we stand to lose money? Where do we stand to find disappointment? Where do we find schedule overruns? That sort of thing. And then to be able to bring some experts on board to help the bank understand how these risks can be mitigated using building information modeling. The good news here is that we have 20 years of experience from all over the world that show how the use of BIM all throughout design, construction, and facility operation can reduce risk and enhance performance. There have been attempts in the US to have banking institutions look at how BIM was used on a project to see if that strengthened their position, their desire to invest in a project. So far, we're not aware of these having borne fruit. However, the data, the experience, and the documented cases are there. Once the bank identifies the opportunities to reduce their risk and increase their profit, then to begin, as we showed in the roadmap, with a case study, ideally a project which is not the largest, most expensive, most high-profile project, but rather something that they can work out the details through, that would make perfect sense. Don't know if you have public-private partnership projects there, as we do here. But in those cases, it is possible to have the public agency, which is part of that agreement, be willing to take on some of the risk of new technologies so that the bank isn't doing that all by itself. But let's turn it over to Isam and hear more practical experience, because obviously ours is theoretical in this regard.
Thank you so much, Tony. Although I find your ideas are brilliant and very applicable, but I would suggest the following. Why don't we engage banks in digitalization contracts for their facilities? I mean, this is a very good practical approach. they will realize the value of having all the assets they own in one big integrated data repository, where they can analyze it, they can view the performance of their assets, their branches, they can gain a lot of reduction in energy expenditures and controlling the operation and maintenance process, and they will live the advantage of having them in their hands. And then I think we need to educate their resources or some of their key staff on this technology, and then they can utilize this technology themselves. They can witness the operation of their facilities themselves. So instead of being isolated from the technology, we engage them with their resources in that technology. So we create a kind of internal promoters for BIM, and afterwards maybe we can ask them to go further and maybe invest in bringing up the capacity of some or all the construction supply chain, because it brings value for them and it will bring value to the supply chain of construction, and as such it will bring value to the whole economy.
Thank you so much, Isam, Anthony. Yo creo que ha sido una excelente presentación. Además, como resumen, nos quedamos con estas dos últimas frases, tanto de Tony como de Isam, el hecho de empezar con programas piloto. No hace falta que sean los proyectos más grandes que tengamos que hacer para empezar a probar estas tecnologías. Y, como dice Isam, es invitar también al sector bancario a conocer cómo un proyecto en BIM funciona y de qué manera se puede desarrollar. Si quieres, Leonardo, cerramos ya la sesión.
Sí, vale. Bueno, agradecemos mucho a los amigos Isam and Tony. We appreciate that presentation. Thank you very much from Venezuela. Bueno, creo que ha sido una interesante presentación. Aquí quedaron unas preguntas por allí de los riesgos de Pep Cole desde allá, desde Barcelona, que pregunta el tema del riesgo que es menor en la banca, y también se habla de la tokenización. Bueno, dará temas para otros eventos mucho más adelante, muchos temas. We appreciate that presentation. Thank you very much. Y muchas gracias, Ignacy, por este evento. Los invitamos para los próximos eventos. También queremos compartir por acá el tema de invitarlos pues al BIM Summit, que va a ser próximamente, a los eventos del BIM Tour. El BIM Tour, los próximos eventos, déjame mostrarlos por favor un segundo. Los eventos del BIM Tour, que son unos eventos organizados por BIM Academy desde España, donde, bueno, hay una serie de eventos, pero el próximo era de Banca y Finanzas, el próximo es de Alcaldías, Gobiernos Municipales, que es el 27 de octubre, y tenemos una serie de eventos, pero con Venezuela tenemos el próximo, que es también de gas y petróleo, Gas and Oil. Tenemos esos importantes eventos, y asimismo los invitamos para el evento que vamos a hacer el 28 de octubre en Venezuela, que es el Hablemos BIM Latam. Están cordialmente invitados para este evento igualmente gratuito. Bueno, creo que con esto, Ignacy, estamos listos con la presencia del día de hoy, agradeciéndole a todos por haber asistido y a todos los expositores y asistentes desde Venezuela y de diversas partes del mundo. Muchas gracias.